This time of year, a lot of people begin thinking about the crucifixion of Christ. In fact, some people begin these man-made traditions or rituals that actually have already began and go all the way up into what we call our Easter holiday. And I think that's a great thing to have that reminder. So much so that we're commanded to do it once a week even. But unfortunately, a lot of people take this time of year and actually concentrate on it. And today's lesson will actually have a little bit of that concentration on the fact that we'll be surrounded around the crucifixion of Christ. And what we're going to do today is we're going to actually look at the legal and medical aspects of the crucifixion of Christ. And because of that, I want us to actually have a much deeper appreciation for exactly what Christ went through. So I want to begin with the legal aspects. And to do so, I do need to give you some background on the legal aspects of the Jewish system, or those of the time. Now, obviously, there are a lot of legal aspects that are written about in the Bible. Leviticus has quite a few. Exodus has some. Deuteronomy has. But the majority of the procedure for the actual legal context is actually in the Talmud, which is broken out into both what's called the Mishnah, or the oral law, as well as the Gemara, which is more of a commentary on it. And for any trial to be valid, it had to follow the Mishnah bit by bit by bit. Very similar to our legal system today. You hear about a lot of times when procedure wasn't followed and people who were obviously guilty actually get to walk free. That actually was kind of built around the Jewish law in that aspect. If any little thing went wrong, the person was assumed to be innocent. And so what we need to do is take a look at the trial of Jesus. In this case, there were multiple trials. And take a look at it. So to give you a little bit of background, the trial was to be held with the judges or jurors of the Sanhedrin, the Great Sanhedrin, sometimes called the Great Council, which was made up of a group of men from 3 different groups. Each group had 23 members, and then 2 officers, which made up a total of 71 members of the Sanhedrin. The appointment was for life, and they were made up basically of priests, of scribes, and of elders. And in order for an actual trial, and I'm going to use the word criminal trial in this aspect to kind of differentiate from others, for this type of trial, there had to be at least 23 in the quorum from the Sanhedrin. And in order for a conviction to occur, you had to have a majority plus 2. So it couldn't be trying to do the math. If there was 23 members there, you couldn't have 11 people saying he's innocent and 12 saying he's guilty. You had to have a group of at least 2, a majority plus 2, in order for a conviction to be held. Additionally, this one kind of is strange and different from ours, where if every single jury has to say that he's guilty in our system, the exact opposite was the case with the Sanhedrin. If everybody agreed that he was guilty, strangely enough, that said he was probably innocent because there was probably a conspiracy. I don't get that one, but that was the actual law of the time. In addition to that, there were a few other laws or procedures that were required. By rule, no man interested or concerned in the matter was to be one of the adjudicators. Basically, if you had an interest in whether this man was guilty or innocent, you couldn't be one of the 23 or whatever of the Sanhedrin making that decision for that man. Additionally, if you were related to that man, you couldn't be one of them making that judgment. Additionally, the suspect, like our system, was innocent until proven guilty. In fact, it went all the way up until the second guilty trial. We'll talk about that in a second. The court never sat on Sabbath or feast day, and the law was very strict that neither the trial nor the capturing could happen during Passover, at night, or on the eve of Sabbath. Generally because of poor artificial lighting for the night issue, but the capture the trial was supposed to start almost immediately. So if you captured it on a eve of Sabbath, then your trial would pretty much go into the Sabbath, which was not allowed. Additionally, things that were considered capital offenses or worthy to be put by death was required to go at least 2, generally 3 days. And it was a requirement. It wasn't optional. For this type of offense, if you were tried and they basically took the witness's testimony, and they basically stated, okay, we're going to take a vote. Unlike our jury system now, where they discuss it and they kind of take a head count, who's this, who's that, and then they discuss it some more, and then they kind of go back and forth. That wasn't allowed in that system. After the testimony, the jurors, or the judges, if you will, would all get together and they would discuss the facts of the case. They would discuss it back and forth, and then there was one vote. It was either yes or no, guilty or innocent. And if you had that majority, plus 2, then they would immediately end the process and wait until the next day. Let them sleep over it, if you will. And then the next day, they would the judges would rehash the testimony. They weren't allowed to banter back and forth, but they were required to review the actual facts of the case, the witness testimony. And then they would vote again. If you voted innocent previously, you had to vote innocent again. If you voted guilty, you could change to innocent if you truly believed that you gave the wrong verdict the previous day. But those were requirements. Other requirements required that witnesses must have seen the entire act from beginning to end. Meaning, one witness couldn't say the first part, and another witness would say the second part. A witness had to witness the exact problem from beginning to end. There had to be at least 2 witnesses, and their stories had to match 100%. If they did not match 100% with the other witnesses, then their testimony was thrown out. Makes sense, right? One other thing is documents weren't allowed. Unlike today where we have circumstantial evidence, we have DNA evidence and all this type of stuff. That wasn't allowed back then. Only oral testimony was allowed. Secondarily, like our system, a person who was the accused didn't have to actually speak. He didn't have to take the stand, if you will. However, he was allowed to cross-examine, because they weren't allowed to have lawyers, he was allowed to cross-examine the witnesses, but the witnesses weren't allowed to ask him questions unless he testified he was one of the quote-unquote witnesses. That makes perfect sense. The judges were not allowed, unless he was testifying, they were not allowed to ask him questions. Again, that's very similar to our current system. So let's actually take a look at exactly what went wrong with the trial of Jesus. I don't know if you were listening to these and if you know the story, you kind of go, wait a second, that's not what happened. Wait a second, that's not what happened. And you could actually do that, some scholars say, up to 42 times. In basic reading and basically looking over the story, I easily found 17 different procedural issues that would immediately require Jesus to be let free. First, if you remember, the arrest could not happen at night. That was a law. Because of poor lighting, it was not allowed at night. When was Jesus arrested? In the Garden of Gethsemane at night. Number 2, because of a Levitical law, they were not allowed to make an arrest based on the testimony of a traitor. If it was an accomplice to the act, they were not allowed to turn state witness by Levitical law. Well, their case was basically built upon Judas, which again would have been an immediate dismissal. Number 3, not only did the arrest occur at night, the trial occurred at night. Again, that was something, if you remember, it was actually occurred on the eve of a Sabbath. So they had to hurry up and get the trial done if they wanted to actually get the conviction. But Ron, didn't you say it had to be 2 days? It did have to be 2 days. But it wasn't. It was done in one small setting at night. With Caiaphas, the high priest, being the one presenting the charges. Again, not allowed. Remember, the judges were not allowed to be witnesses if they were going to judge it. And that's exactly what happened in this case. The charges against Christ. When we read through it, we see that he was charged with blasphemy, right? And then all of a sudden, somehow when he went to Pilate, they were treason. That's not what he was convicted of. He was convicted, or again, falsely convicted, but that's not what they said he was guilty of in front of the Sanhedrin. And they had to take it to the Romans because the Jews were not allowed to promote a death sentence. They could promote it as being a death offense, and then they'd give it to the Romans, and the Romans would go, yes, and then the Romans would take care of the actual execution. But in this case, that's not exactly what happened, because they changed the charges right in the middle. Number 9, 10, whatever it happens to be, if you remember the reading that we had this morning, the witnesses did not agree in their testimony. No two witnesses had the exact same testimony. Again, if you remember our talk just seconds ago, that was a requirement that at least two of the witnesses had to have exact testimony. If their testimony didn't match the other, they were thrown out. So they couldn't get anybody to agree. So what generally happened is, the next problem, Caiaphas asked Jesus a question. Before that time, Jesus had to testify. And so Caiaphas, as one of the judges of the Sanhedrin, was not allowed to ask him a question. Well, he did. And then based on his answer, they took absolutely no more testimony. Remember I told you, their job was to presume innocence. And yet when he said what he did, they didn't go, well, that would be blasphemy if that wasn't true. Let's compare what you prophesied and compare it to what the law said. Let's compare prophecy with what actually happened. Let's compare and make sure that you are given a blasphemous statement. But they didn't do that. Again, calls for an immediate dismissal. So let's move on to the trial of Pilate. We know a lot of the Roman laws, they also had what we consider double jeopardy. Double jeopardy is basically if you're found innocent of a crime, you can't be tried for that crime again. There was a movie with actually Judd all about it. But the long story short, when Jesus went before Pilate, Pilate gave a verdict. You remember what that verdict was? Innocent. I find nothing wrong with this man. So he's free, right? No, that's not what happened. The Bible tells us Pilate reconsidered. He reconsidered after he had found him innocent. He reconsidered. And then he decided, you know what? I'm going to push this off on somebody else. And again, in that trial, Pilate said, I can find nothing wrong with this man. So Jesus was susceptible to something the Roman authorities said couldn't happen, a double jeopardy. But as Brother Roger said this morning, that was part of God's plan all along. So God's plan took hold. Jesus was found guilty, falsely so, but he was found guilty, and all of these rules that was set up to protect the innocent was manipulated by man to fail. So what happened? Well, what happened next is where our graphic issues come to play. What happened here is Jesus was taken away. But before we get there, I want to go back even before the trial to that garden. Before he was arrested, the Bible talks about a condition that happened. As Jesus was praying there, out of his pores came sweat like blood. Remember that? There's an actual medical condition that's very rare that occurs, and this is one of the times I'm going to have to look at my notes here, called hematidrosis. Hematidrosis is a very rare phenomenon that occurs under immense stress.